Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. On tonight's headlines. The suspect police believe to be responsible for the shooting at least 4 people in Northwest D.C. is found dead. Police say a gunman opened fire at Connecticut Avenue, Van Ness, neighborhood of Washington. Multiple people shot, including a child. Authorities in 2 eastern Ukrainian regions said that fighting with Russian forces was fierce as hope fades for a truce over their Orthodox Easter weekend. And seeking a way to end the bloodshed, the UN announced that UN Chief Antonio Guterres will meet President Putin in Moscow next week and could also visit President Zelensky in Kiev. And in Jerusalem and the occupied Palestinian territories, where the UN Rights Office, OHCHR, expressed concern over the escalating violence during the past month and unnecessary use of force by Israeli security forces. First to the U.S., where the suspect police believed to be responsible for the shooting of at least 4 people in Northwest D.C. Friday was found dead. According to D.C. Police Chief Robert Conti in a news conference Friday evening, U.S. time, the department was searching for a 23-year-old Raymond Spencer of Fairfax, Virginia, as the person of interest.
The individual's name has come to light as a Raymond Spencer. He is a 23-year-old male.
Now, police believe the suspect took his own life as officers were entering the apartment the suspect was located. The department doesn't believe that there were any other shooters. Mr. Conti said police are unable to identify the suspect until next of kin is notified. Police also said when they searched the suspect's apartment, they recovered over 6 firearms, including several long guns and multiple rounds of ammunition and handguns. He added that preliminary investigation shows that the suspect got the weapons illegally. A 54-year-old man, a woman in her mid-30s are in stable condition. A 12-year-old girl is also stable with a minor gunshot wound. Police were later notified that a woman in her mid-60s was also injured and suffered a grazed gunshot wound to her back. Mr. Emmerman said she was treated at the scene. It's still unknown if the victims are related. Social media videos appeared to record lengthy bursts of automatic gunfire near a secondary school and a university in the neighborhood, which also houses a number of embassies. The University of the District of Columbia, across the street from the location of the shooting, went into lockdown. Police are actively investigating and working to figure out a motive. And now to the latest on the war in Ukraine. Russia hoping to take control over all east and south of Ukraine. After occupying nearly all of Mariupol, only one steel mill is left. It's been in the news for a couple of days now, and that is the only one left standing. Ukraine's last stronghold is now surrounded by Russian forces a day after Russian President Vladimir Putin declared victory over the city. But Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said Mariupol continues to resist despite what Russia says. A few kilometers from the front line in the north of Donbas region, locals are caught between denial and fatalism as they see that Russian troops are drawing closer. Red Cross workers are helping to evacuate the most vulnerable from shelters, while others struggle to live with shops closed and hospitals running at minimum capacity. Russia's military now plans to shift its military away from Mariupol, unleashing a massive assault on eastern areas outside the city. Take a look.
Ну, поначалу нормально было, бахкало в районе Студенческой. А недавно, 2 дня назад, у нас вообще вот сюда во двор упало, и там в соседнем, за этим домом, короче, там в соседнем дворе в подвал залетел снаряд. А сейчас вот я слышу, что-то взрывается, вот успел как-то спрятаться, слава богу, что обошлось.
Meanwhile, a Russian general may have revealed the wider ambitions of his country, Major General Rustam Minikayev saying, since the start of the second phase of the special operation, one of the tasks of the Russian army is to establish full control over the Donbass and southern Ukraine, and this will provide a land corridor to Crimea, he added, referring to the peninsula Russia annexed from Ukraine back in 2014. Russia's change of strategic focus to southern and eastern Ukraine saw invading forces leave behind a trail of indiscriminate destruction, civilian bodies around Kiev, including in the commuter town of Bucha. Meanwhile, authorities in two eastern Ukrainian regions said Saturday that fighting with Russian forces was fierce, and hopes are fading for a truce over their Orthodox Easter weekend. The governor of the eastern Kharkiv region, Oleg Sinkubov, said on Telegram that Kiev retook 3 villages near the Russian border after fierce battles. He also said the battles took place on Friday morning. The villages lie north of Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv, and close to Russian territory. Brudyanka is around 40 kilometers southwest of the border. Now, Sinikubov claimed Russian forces had also attacked residential infrastructure, killing 2 people. Meanwhile, UN Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet on Friday condemned the horrors committed against civilians in Ukraine, as the World Health Organization warned that it feared the worst in devastated areas of the country's east and south.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, is urging respect for international human rights law amid growing evidence of war crimes in Ukraine. The Russian armed forces have indiscriminately shelled and bombed populated areas, killing civilians and wrecking hospitals, schools, and other civilian infrastructure, actions that may amount to war crimes. Our UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine has also documented what appear to be the use of weapons with indiscriminate effects, causing civilian casualties and damage to civilian objects by Ukrainian armed forces in the east of the country. Willful killing of protected persons, including summary executions, are gross violations of international human rights law and serious violations of international humanitarian law and amount to war crimes.
Ms. Shamdamsani added that more than 90% of civilian casualties have been recorded in government-controlled territories and were therefore attributable to Russian forces. On Thursday, U.S. satellite imagery company Maxar released these photos it assessed showed a mass grave on the northwestern edge of Mangush, west of Mariupol. Now, seeking a way to end the bloodshed, the UN announced that UN Chief Antonio Guterres will meet President Putin in Moscow next week and could also visit President Zelensky in Kiev. Guterres will see Zelensky and Ukraine's foreign minister on Thursday, 2 days after visiting Moscow, according to the United Nations and a statement. The Kremlin confirmed Friday that Putin would meet Guterres on Tuesday. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told state news agency RIA Novosti that he will also be received by, quote, Russian President Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that talks between Russia and Ukraine had again stalled. Let's listen in.
По крайней мере, сейчас они застопорились, потому что дней 5 назад очередное предложение, которое мы передали украинским переговорщикам, которое было сформулировано с учетом их поступивших на тот момент комментариев, оно остается без ответа. А когда тут... Мне очень странно слышать каждый день заявления украинских представителей разного сорта, включая президента и его советников, которые наводят на мысль о том, что им эти переговоры совсем не нужны, что они смирились со своей судьбой.
The Russian foreign minister also said he was under the impression Kiev may not want to continue the talks. Kremlin aide Vladimir Medinsky, who is Russia's chief negotiator with Kiev authorities, said, however, that he had spoken to his Ukrainian counterpart on Friday. Talks have continued since early in the fighting, but offered no concrete results. Kiev said last week that negotiations with Russia to end the war were extremely difficult. Meanwhile, the IMF warned that the impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine is having a severe negative impact on the economic prospects for Europe. Let's listen in.
Our regional economic outlook lowers the growth forecast for Europe. For advanced economy, we cut our growth projection by 1 percentage points to 3% in 2022 from those in the January World Economic Outlook update. For emerging economies, and we are including here Belarus, Russia, Turkey, and Ukraine, we have cut projected growth by 1.5 percentage points to 3.2%. Several major economies, such as France, Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom, are projected to barely expand or even contract for 2 straight quarters this year. Activity in Russia is forecast to shrink by 8.5%, and in Ukraine by 35%. Budgetary pressures will be more acute in several countries that are opening their borders to refugees, for example in Poland, which is hosting almost 3 million, or Moldova, where the number of refugees is very high relative to the population. This underlines the need to share the costs of humanitarian relief fairly among EU members. For non-member hosts, assistance by multilateral and regional partners should help manage costs, particularly where public finances are already stretched.
The news continues. Zero on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba, sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Ikaw ba'y lilisan kahit di pinagtagpo?
Hello po, I'm Bianca.
Please do catch me here on Letters and Music, on air and online this Sunday, April 24 from 1 to 2 p.m. only here in Net 25. See you!
Uy! Pare, alam mo ba, ang tapang pala ni paring Joey. Talaga ba? Oo, tumalo siya sa aeroplano, walang dalang parachute. Paano mo nalaman niya? Sa buro niya.
Ito po ang inyong Tia Melchora. Nasaksihan natin ang masalimuot na buhay ni Leslie. Parang malungkot ka.
Ang aming game ay Balloon Centipede.
Welcome back to Jerusalem and the occupied Palestinian territories now, where the UN Rights Office, OHCHR, expressed concern over escalating violence during the past month and unnecessary use of force by Israeli security forces. Israel, meanwhile, said it will close its only crossing from the Gaza Strip for workers on Sunday in response to overnight rocket fire, stopping short of conducting retaliatory strikes in an apparent bid to ease tensions. The rocket attacks on Friday night and Saturday morning followed days of clashes at Jerusalem's flashpoint, the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, and a month of deadly violence. The UN Rights Office said that Israeli security forces allegedly confined dozens of Palestinians inside Al-Qibli Mosque and that 6 people were injured by sponge-tipped bullets, including a journalist, an elderly person, and a paramedic. Tensions in Jerusalem have impacted other areas, OHCR said, pointing to Palestinian armed groups that launched 6 rockets and 1 mortar shell towards Israel in recent days. And take a look at these images of the aftermath of a blast at a beachside Mogadishu restaurant that killed 6 people. The restaurant was hosting Somalia's police chief and legislators when the explosion occurred. The government officials were unharmed in the blast. The explosion came days after a mortar attack targeted Somalia's parliament during a meeting by newly elected lawmakers. No lawmakers were harmed in Monday's assault, which was claimed by Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab that has been waging an emergency or an insurgency against the central government for more than a decade. The Horn of Africa nation has seen a spate of attacks in recent weeks as it hobbles through a long-delayed election process to pick a new president. In other news, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has signed a bill to revoke Disney's tax status in the state. The bill eliminates Disney's self-governing status in the area around its Orlando theme park by June 2023. Tax privileges have been in place for more than 50 years. Now, for more than 5 decades, as I said, Disney has been able to make additions to its resort area, including new theme parks, hotels, and other tourism experiences without interference from local counties. The Reedy Creek Improvement District was an area created by Florida's Congress in 1967 to facilitate the construction of Disney World in Orlando. Now, the move was the latest episode in a dispute between DeSantis' Republican administration and Disney after the company criticized the passage in March of a law banning school lessons on sexual orientation. In other news, Earth Day is being observed around the world. The Wildlife Conservation Society, or WCS, and Cambodian government officials celebrated Earth Day on Friday night with a fashion show representing innovative outfits made from recycled waste such as plastics, cement sacks, and cardboards. Models are showcasing 8 outfits inspired by critically endangered species from around the Tonle Sap, the largest inland fishing area in the world. The Tonle Sap is a source of subsistence and survival for more than 1 million Cambodians living on or around the lake. But water levels have plummeted and fish stocks dwindled because of climate change and dams upstream on the Mekong River. It also supports at least 50 globally threatened species, including the critically endangered Bengal florican and Southeast Asia's largest water bird colony in the lake's flooded forest, according to the WCS. In honor of David Attenborough's dedication to research, documentation, and advocacy in protecting and restoring nature, the UN Environment Program, or UNEP, announced that he is the recipient of the prestigious Champions of the Earth Lifetime Achievement Award. Take a look.
Truly, truly, extremely honored.
Well, thank you. It's our great pleasure and honor.
We're in a new era. The United Nations without them, we will never solve the environmental crisis. The world has to get together. We are living in a new era in which nationalism is simply not enough. Nationalism we must wave goodbye to it. We must feel that we are all citizens of this one planet, because unless we do, we won't solve the problems. We know what the problems are, and we know how to solve them. All we lack is unified action.
Right.
These problems cannot be solved by one nation, no matter how big that single nation is. We can only speak man to man through devices like the one that we are speaking on now, and hoping that we will persuade people around the world that if we act together, we can solve these problems. The message is that the natural world has more resources than we can possibly imagine. We've worked out how to kill them. Now we could give them a chance for them to come back and save themselves and save us. And fortunately, the images that this device that we're talking on now have international understanding. It's they that will, in the end, convince people much more than any argument by me or a scientist or whatever. It is seeing those things that everybody in the world recognizes are crucially important to this.
In other news, Pakistan's Prime Minister said Saturday he will chair an emergency meeting of a national task force for polio eradication after authorities detected the country's first case of the debilitating neurodegenerative disease in 15 months. Health officials announced the discovery of the wild polio case on Friday, saying a 15-month-old boy had been paralyzed by the virus in the northwestern district of North Waziristan. The country's last case was detected in January 2021, and earlier this year, authorities celebrated going 12 months without a single case, the first time that had occurred since eradication efforts began. Meanwhile, South Africa is witnessing a worrying spike in coronavirus cases after a relative lull in new infections, according to official data. Daily official updates released by the National Institute for Communicable Diseases Friday showed 4,631 infections had been detected in the past 24 hours. This is the highest number registered for almost 3 jumps, and a jump from an average daily of around 1,300 infections recorded last week. Health Minister Joe Fala told Parliament earlier on Friday that the rise in infections was worrying. More than half of the new cases reported Friday were found in the most populous province, Gauteng, where Johannesburg is situated. Flood-hit KwaZulu-Natal province recorded the second highest number, accounting for 22% of the latest cases. With a total number of laboratory-confirmed cases of more than 3.7 million, COVID has hit South Africa harder than any other country on the continent. NICD Executive Director Adrian Purin said the Omicron variant is still the dominant circulating variant. And Singapore will lift most of its strict virus curbs next week, officials announced, hailing a significant step towards normalcy. Authorities announced plans Friday to lift more measures, including scrapping all testing requirements for vaccinated travelers beginning Tuesday, April 26. Daily infections and hospitalizations have declined steadily in the past week, with just under 3,100 local cases a day on average, according to the Health Ministry. Also, starting Tuesday, group size limits and safe distancing requirements will be lifted, and all workers will be allowed to return to the office. People will no longer be required to check in with contact tracing tokens or apps when entering most venues. But masks will still be required for indoor settings and on public transportations. And Thailand announced the end of compulsory COVID tests for vaccinated travelers as the country steps up efforts to revive its pandemic-thrummed tourism industry. Thailand's COVID-19 task force said that from May 1, fully vaccinated visitors would no longer have to take a test on arrival and wait in a hotel room for the result. Authorities will now only require arrivals to show proof of vaccination and health insurance coverage of at least $10,000. Unvaccinated travelers will either need to show a negative test result taken within 72 hours of departure for Thailand or undergo 5 days of hotel quarantine and a test. Earlier this month, Thailand dropped the requirement for mandatory pre-arrival COVID tests. In other news, rescuers in Japan were searching for a sightseeing boat carrying around 30 people that sent a call warning it was sinking off the north coast, according to the Coast Guard and local media. A local Coast Guard official told AFP that rescuers had set up a task force to tackle the incident and look for the missing, but they declined to confirm any other details of the reported accident. National broadcaster NHK said the crew of the Kazu 1 told the Coast Guard the boat's bow was flooded and the vessel was sinking off the Shiratoko Peninsula in northern Hokkaido. The crew and passengers were wearing life jackets, but the distress call said the vessel was tilting about 30 degrees, according to NHK. The Coast Guard then reportedly lost contact with the vessel, and search helicopters arrived in the area around 4 hours after the distress signal was sent. The Shiratoko Peninsula is a World Heritage Site designated by UNESCO in 2005 and is known for its unique wildlife, including the endangered Steller sea lion, as well as migratory birds and brown bears. And we'll be back with more news right after this. Stay tuned.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Abangan ang mga istorya ng pagbangon sa Season 2 ng Lingap Stories tuwing Linggo, alas 5 ng hapon sa Net25.
Sa pagsisikap na maisulong ang mga positibong pagbabago sa bansa, lalo na sa ekonomiya at kalakalan, mahalaga ang pagsasama-sama at pagkakaisa upang makaisip ng moderno at epektibong mga paraan para lutasin ang mga suliranin sa nakaraan, sa kasalukuyan at sa ating hinaharap. Nagtipon-tipon ang mga leader ng iba't ibang business groups kasama ang mga entrepreneurs at industry experts sa CEO Summit 2022. ginanap sa Baguio Country Club. 4 na mahalagang layunin ang nasa agenda ng summit: opportunities for growth, transformative leadership, collaborative governance, and the future of smart cities.
So far, lots of great speakers, amazing learning.
End of the day boils down to how to develop the community, elevate the micro SMEs, elevate the farmers.
All these in this episode of Open for Business.
Siguradong todo na o toda na ang kasiyahan ngayong linggo sa Tara Game agad-agad kasama ang mga gamers nating tricycle drivers.
Basta driver, sweet lover!
Kinakabahan ako. Alam mo, yung mga kinakabahan dito, yun ang nananalo ng 100,000. Sa mo gagamitin, kunyari, ikaw ang nanalo ng 20,000 na maging 100,000.
Sa bahay po sa amin.
Bakit? Sige, anong ba kailangan sa bahay nyo?
Kasi lumalaki na po yan ako eh. Kinakabahan din ako.
Kinakabahan ka rin? O lahat ito kinakabahan?
Papasok ko po ang katanungan kay Jason Rubia.
Samantala mo yung dinilip ko. Kaya naman, tumutok na sa TV, YouTube at Facebook at manood ng Tara Game! Agad-agad! This Sunday, 7 p.m. sa Net 25!
Welcome back. This information have been used to mislead voters for as long as there have been elections, and they have been especially pervasive this year as millions of Filipinos are casting ballots in a contentious election. There are sample ballots spreading around wherein it's asking voters to mark number 10, number 7, as you can see here in the ballots, to mark out senatorial votes that you don't like. Any markings on the ballot other than the shading the ovals for the candidates they choose will spoil the ballot. And Comelec is reminding everyone to report this to the authorities. Overseas voting officially started on April 9 at the Romulo Hall of the Philippine Embassy in Washington, D.C. and will run for 1 month until May 9. We have an update from Jeff Sanidad from our Washington, D.C. Bureau.
Exercise your right to nation building. That's the call of the Philippine Consul General in Washington, D.C. to overseas voters for the nearing Philippine national elections.
Well, this is their opportunity to be part of nation building. They have the constitutional right to choose the leaders of the country, so let's exercise that right.
Embassy officials did acknowledge a delay in receiving unaccomplished ballots. They say, however, there is time for Filipinos abroad to cast their vote.
Consul General Eric Arribas asked overseas Filipinos that once they receive the ballots to waste no time, accomplish them right away and mail them back or drop them off at the embassy nearest you.
We would like to remind them that once they have received the ballot, to accomplish them and return them to us as soon as possible. We don't want our vote, the vote of our registered voters not to be counted just because it did not meet the deadline for us to receive them before they can be counted. So we just like to, as a message for everyone, to the registered voters, to make sure that there will be enough time for us to receive their ballots once they have received and accomplished them.
He also explains the process of validating the accomplished ballots once received by the embassy.
So from the time that we get the ballots from the post office, there's a drop box here at the embassy. There's a special group of election officers which would inspect the ballot envelope to make sure that that ballot corresponds to the name of a registered voter, which is included in the list of certified overseas voters, or the certified list of voters, or CLOV, which was sent to us by Comelec, to make sure that there's integrity in the ballot that we have received. And then, from that group of election officials, those ballots would now be given to another group, which will be feeding them to the vote counting machine, or VCM as we call it. And that's being done every Monday and Thursday. Data will be transmitted to Comelec in due time. That is when, on the day that the voting or the elections will be closed, and that is on May 9. So every step of the way, we make sure that the process is foolproof. Everything is above board, and everything is compliant with all of the guidelines that have been set by COMELEC.
And about those who missed their opportunity to register for this year's elections,
too bad. Well, there probably has been some, probably they didn't know that registration was going on, but registration has been going on for 2 years before the deadline was set. In fact, there was a 2-week extension of the deadline. So maybe they missed that information. So I suppose for us Filipinos overseas, it's always best to check the website or maybe the Facebook account of the Philippine Embassy or the Philippine Consulate General where they are residing at. Because all of the advisories, all of the information related to the elections, whether it's registration or the election itself, are all there. So we always would like to encourage people to check our website. Again, if I may say, philippineembassy-dc.org, so they will be updated all the time.
Consul General Arribas further says he hopes for peace and prosperity for the Filipino nation come Election Day and beyond.
Just peace and prosperity. It's my general hope for the country. And it's not only for this election, it's not only after the new leaders have been selected, it's for every day that I pray to God for our country. It's for peace and prosperity.
Jeff Sanidad, Eagle News, Washington, D.C.
Thanks, Jeff. France on Saturday prepared to choose between centrist President Emmanuel Macron and far-right challenger Marine Le Pen to rule the country for the next 5 years after a bitterly contested and polarizing election campaign. Macron is the favorite to win re-election in the runoff ballot on Sunday, and there are indications he bolstered his advantage with a combative performance in the one-off election debate against a somewhat defensive Le Pen. A Le Pen victory would also send shockwaves across Europe. Left-wing EU leaders, including German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, have pleaded with France to choose Macron over his rival. If elected, though, Macron is expected in a symbolic gesture to address supporters on the Champs de Mars in central Paris at the foot of the Eiffel Tower. Polls in mainland France will open at 6 GMT, 0600 GMT on Sunday, and close 12 hours later. In other news, an official of the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority denounced misinformation circulated by bus operators on its 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. window hour scheme, resulting in irate commuters bound for provinces. In a Laging Handa briefing, MMDA Chair Romando Artes said that some bus operators have been telling passengers who went to their private terminals to wait until 10 p.m. instead of referring them to the 2 land terminals allowed to operate outside the window hours. Let's listen in.
Pwedeng bumiyahe. Meron naman pong biyahe talaga na nagta-terminate sa inlet at yung pong may mga QR codes ay may biyahe po papunta ng Cubao Araneta Center Terminal. So wala naman pong kalituhan dapat dyan. It's just that sa amin pong palagay, sinadya po ito para po magalit ang tao sa LTFRB, sa MMDA, para po ma-justify yung pagbubukas muli ng mga terminal sa EDSA at sa Manila at magamit po nila ito ng buong araw, even outside the window hours. Ang mga bus operators, sana po wag nating iliko yung facts, particularly kay Mr. Alex Yage. Marami po siyang binabitawan na salita na mali po, na andon naman po siya sa lahat ng aming pagpupulong. Kaya po sana wag nilang gamitin itong mismong window hours na para lituhin po yung ating mga kababayan, para po magamit nila yung kanilang terminals na privado na hindi po allowed under LTFRB rules.
The window hour scheme, he said, came after bus operators requested that they may be allowed to use their private terminals even outside peak hours. Alex Yage, the executive director of the Provincial Bus Operators Association of the Philippines, earlier said provincial buses should have been allowed inside NCR after the shift to Alert Level 1 on March 10. On the last week of March, the MMDA announced a 2-week dry run for the return of provincial buses to EDSA during the said window hours. The LTFRB is set to summon provincial bus operators that did not deploy units to Metro Manila for allegedly violating permit to operate terms. In other news, the Department of Foreign Affairs said a smart city built by the Korea Land Housing Corporation will soon rise in Clark Freeport Zone. The government-owned Clark Development Corporation, or CDC, and LH have already inked a smart city memorandum of understanding on April 15 at Songdo International Business District in Incheon Province, some 30 kilometers southwest of Seoul. The MOU states that LH will build a smart city that will be linked to the Clark International Airport, which will also become a logistics hub with infrastructure for tourism, recreation, and aviation maintenance. The DFA said the future smart city will use artificial intelligence and big data to process real-time information collected through sensors and allow city operators to analyze data for future plans. CDC President Manuel Garlan looked forward to technology sharing through the MOU, especially the Korea Communications Technology Network, which will be used by LH Urban Development for the K-Smart City development. The New York International Auto Show returned for the first time in 2 years after being canceled amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The show, which runs from April 15 to the 24th, has vehicles from dozens of car companies. Joanne Soriano is at the scene. Joanne.
Well, I'm at the auto show at the Jacob Javits Convention Center in New York to bring you the latest in automotive news for 2022. In a much-anticipated return to the Javits from the 2-year hiatus because of the pandemic, this event brought major brands out to showcase their newest models and prototypes. With the rising cost of gas, it comes as no surprise that consumers are looking for economical and environmentally friendly solutions in the form of hybrids and electric vehicles. The organizers unveiled the largest electric vehicle, or EV, test track ever created at an auto show. Ford is one brand committed to the EV space.
Ford is absolutely committed to electrification. So first we started with our Mustang Mach-E, which is 0 to 60 thrills with 0 emissions. And then next was our E-Transit, which is the backbone of business. And behind me here is the all-new, all-electric F-150 Lightning, and it will be delivered to customers in the coming weeks.
For the open road enthusiast, the show featured many cars ready for families and outdoor travelers looking for their next road trip or camping adventure.
So this is our all-new electric SUV, the 2023 Solterra. This is an excellent EV for a family adventure and features like X mode to help going off-road. So you can take it further off the pavement, off into the trail, off into the campground, places that most EVs can't go.
One of the most exciting comebacks at the show was the Volkswagen ID Buzz.
Well, the ID Buzz is our reimagined version of the classic microbus, only using an electric architecture, electric platform. This car is going to go on sale in Europe in the fall. People just love it. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's young or old. It doesn't matter whether it's people who remember it from the flower power generation or it's young kids. Everybody seems to be happy to see the car.
The show was full of interactive exhibits, adoptable pets, and even rides for the thrill seekers. The auto show runs through April 24. Joanne Soriano, Eagle News, New York, New York.
Thank you, Joanne. Meanwhile, NASA's Perseverance Mars rover captured Phobos, the larger of Mars' 2 moons eclipsing the sun. It's the highest quality footage of a Phobos solar eclipse ever taken from the Martian surface. Take a look. As always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert, stay informed, because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.